Quantum technology is moving fast, but building real impact takes more than breakthroughs. It takes the right people, the right strategy, and the right ecosystem. Welcome to Beyond the Bit Quantum Pathways. I'm Amir Rasool. Each episode I speak with founders, researchers, and operators, shaping how quantum is built, commercialized, and scaled in the real world. And if you're building teams in quantum, QAI Talent tackles this exact challenge. Welcome back. In this episode, I sit down with Burns Healy, who's the Director of Quantum Practice at Quantum Sky, the company you may have known up until very recently as Tyto Athene. In fact, we broke the Rebrand news right here on the podcast. Burns has one of the most interesting paths in quantum I've come across so far. A PhD in pure mathematics, a diehard academic who thought that university was the only place to do real research, then a move to Dell during 2020 that led him deep into quantum computing and infrastructure. We talk about how he got here, what his new role actually involves, and why he believes the future of quantum belongs to subject matter experts and not just quantum engineers. So let's get into it. Hi, Burns. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Hi there. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No, very much my pleasure. So before I start, I think there's some fresh news, and I think I might be the first podcaster to report this. I think as of this week, the company's rebranded from Tyto Athene to Quantum Sky.
Yeah, there it is. No, I've got the background on and everything. No, exactly. We're very excited to do this.
Exactly. So listeners, you're hearing it here first. So before I go any further, for anyone who doesn't know the company, can you give us a plain English version? I suppose, what does Quantum Sky actually do and who for?
Absolutely. So our main customer is the federal government and its various agencies, both civilian and armed services. Historically, our legacy business has been more about network modernization. That's still a great strength of ours, but we're moving into this space, and the name reflects it, of emerging technologies. And what we're seeing in the field of technology is just this emergence of new capabilities, new domains, new applications, new architectures. So we're embracing that. We're excelling in it. We're developing additional expertise. And, as we move to a post-quantum age in technology, we're ready to be taking advantage of that and developing new solutions for our customers.
Fantastic. So, I suppose, why the change and why specific with quantum? Because you're kind of putting your eggs in a basket there.
I think that, the first thing is that I think quantum technology is a lot broader than most people may give it credit for. Obviously, listeners to your podcast probably already know this, but, there's not just quantum computing, but there's also quantum computing has impacts on cryptography. So post-quantum cryptography is another aspect that we're trying to capture with this rebrand. But you go beyond the QPU and the implications of the QPU. Obviously, quantum sensors are maturing very rapidly, and those have a lot of implication for federal contracting spaces, but also quantum networking devices. You talk about applications like quantum key distribution. I think that really there's a lot of different technologies in that bucket. So as much as it might seem narrow, I like to see it as a world of exploration. And the fact is that quantum technologies are going to have, like I said, impact on cryptography, but it's also going to have an impact on modern AI workflows, right? And all different areas. So we see it as more of a regime change within the world of technology itself.
Fantastic. And that's similar to where I come from. I'd been working in the AI machine learning space for quite a while, and I saw quantum emerging, and I was like, oh, look, this is a life-changing technology in my lifetime. And hence where I am doing the podcast and recruiting through it, etc. Now, with yourself, we will come on to this a little bit further, but I know you're literally a month in the seat, so it's really early days. I suppose, whether you're able to answer this or not, if someone was to stop you and say, so what do you do? How would you describe the role that you've just moved into?
I think it started very similar to what I just said about quantum technology. It's really a matter of paying attention to the domain as it evolves and just understanding where the applications and intersections are with the new capabilities that are coming out from the engineering landscape, and understanding what the implications are for productization. What does it mean? For example, my team will be in charge of what does it mean to offer a post-quantum cryptographic solution, right? To help our customers become PQC enabled. Does that mean just doing a cryptographic inventory for them and understanding where those encryption mechanisms lie in their stack? Or is it helping them go all the way to migrating to a PQC standard selected by NIST, right? And so understanding what that roadmap looks like, what the timeline is, obviously you'll do both of those things, but the question is when and how. So then apply the similar logic to quantum compute, right? Helping understand the dynamic of when do we shift over from seeing most quantum compute consumed via the cloud API, right? Moving eventually to quantum enabled data centers and HPC clusters. And so understanding what the steps along that roadmap look like, how we capture the right expertise to guide our customers and provide forward guidance, and then actually assist in those migrations. So really, we're running the gamut of this is a broad space. It is a lot of new capabilities and understanding what that means for the market and what that means for what we can now do, with technology that we couldn't before.
Amazing. So obviously this podcast, as we've spoken about, is about exploring quantum, and I call it quantum pathways. It's about, showing the roles that exist out there. And obviously you've just given a great example of the future of Quantum Sky. I think what I'd like to do is kind of wind the clock back a little bit and see how you've ended up here, because that is going to be quite informative to the people that listen to this podcast. From what I understand, you finished your PhD in pure mathematics. At that point, where did you think your career was going?
So I was a diehard academic at that point. I was getting ready to start my postdoc after I finished my PhD, and I was going to go on and get a tenure track opportunity, hopefully achieve tenure. I met my wife in grad school. She was a PhD as well, and we both kind of had these academic aspirations. Of course, I'm sure many listeners will probably have some familiarity with the academic system and understand the challenge that comes with the dual academic household. So that is something we were trying to navigate as well. But I was kind of dyed in the wool academic lifestyle. Still appreciate it very much. This comes from my dad. My dad is a 30-year tenured professor of chemistry. So this is something I had sort of in my bones from the beginning. And that was the initial plan, I'll say.
Fantastic. And then you joined Dell as an emerging technologies researcher. So can you tell me about that kind of move and that journey? Because it sounds amazing.
Absolutely. So this was a little bit of a time of upheaval. This was the year 2020. Just a small thing happened in that year, right? That changed a lot for a lot of people, myself included. So, all of our teaching in my postdoc went remote in 2020. Everything kind of began to shut down. At the time, my kids would have been about 1 and 3 years old. So we had now kids who weren't in daycare. They were at home with us. And it led to a lot of introspection, I'd say. It was also a little bit strange for the academic job market as well. Things were getting extended and new positions weren't getting posted because, administrations were very curious or very careful rather about where budgets were going to go. There was talk of declining enrollment already, and there was a worry that people wouldn't come back to the classroom after COVID. So there's a lot going on at that time. And while that was happening, a friend of mine from my PhD program who was working at Dell in the R&D office reached out to me and said, "Hey, my team has an opening. We're all working fully remote anyway." I was in Milwaukee at the time, and this office was on the East Coast. And he said, just work from home, no problem. And so I thought I would give it a shot. And what I discovered in that interview process and then subsequently on the job is that I'd been kind of working under this assumption that there wasn't really good intellectually stimulating research level work to be done outside the academy. I kind of thought it was the only place you could do that kind of work and have that kind of fulfillment. And what I learned is that wasn't true. So there are a lot of corporate research programs where you can get that same kind of stimulation that you're used to getting, in the academic world. So I joined and I sought out my own expertise. I fell in love with quantum computing very quickly. I found it was a natural overlap with my existing skill set. So I kind of focused in on that and made that my initial domain of expertise. Yeah.
Which kind of answers my next question. So from an emerging technologies researcher perspective, what other kind of technologies were on the radar and what drew you to quantum?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I remember some of the areas of interest on my team were things like digital twin work. That was a big one. There's kind of blockchain and Web3 areas of research, zero trust security, which is still something I think is very, very interesting. And then again, I would have started prior to kind of that ChatGPT inflection, but at the time, AI and ML was still kind of a little more of a research and a little less of a production grade problem. So that was one as well. So there were a lot of different areas that I could have kind of chosen to specialize in. And honestly, you could have forced me into any of them, and I would have been happy. I would have found my way. I did like quantum, and I like the challenge of it. I know a lot of people shy away from it. They say, "Oh, it's very hard to get into." That's not what I would say. I think that there's areas for anybody to get into, no matter what their background is. But I did appreciate a little bit of the challenge of learning something new, and the fit with my pure mathematics was applicable. Yeah.
Fantastic. So then you went on to, so it's fantastic that Dell were looking at quantum at that point. And then you moved into the role of quantum infrastructure lead. So can you tell me about that and how you decided to kind of go down that specialism and they allowed you to?
Absolutely. So really it was an opportunity that sort of fell into my lap. We started, so before I existed on an agile team, initially when I started at Dell, my day-to-day was supposed to be more about software engineering, more so than pure research. It was kind of that hybrid role. And so we had folks looking at every area, but nobody was kind of dedicated full-time permanently in any one domain. And what ended up happening is sort of after that ChatGPT inflection point, I remember thinking, we're all going to be doing AI now, and all of these cool other emerging technologies are going to be sort of left by the wayside. And what I found that happened was actually the exact opposite. So what happened was that, leadership executives, they realized, hey, emerging technologies can go from 0 to 60 very quickly. Mm-hmm. And if you have a team dedicated and ready to leverage those new capabilities, then you can gain a massive advantage or really just hit the ground running when kind of that inflection point happens. So rather than having our team kind of all focused on AI, granted, some of them did go on and specialize in AI, but we actually then stood up a dedicated quantum team, everybody was full-time on quantum technologies for exactly that reason, that they saw, that this could happen very quickly. And so our team's remit, the reason infrastructure is in the title, is the remit sort of had to do with the idea that quantum computers could have an impact on our business model. And I say an impact, I don't want to say disruption. I think that was what leadership was worried about, that it would totally disrupt server sales and replace them. And eventually what we counseled is that wasn't true. They're very complementary. And actually, if anything, that could be a whole new market to enable hybrid deployments that included QPU, but also CPU and GPU as well. So we were focused on that aspect, how we actually organize Dell's product portfolio to augment and accelerate quantum devices.
That's quite early on, to be fair. So what did that look like on a day-to-day, month-to-month at that stage?
So a lot of it had to do with evaluating roadmaps and talking to vendors. A lot of my day was taken up with speaking to, the IBMs of the world, IonQ, QEra, Dirac. I could go on, and I already feel bad that I even name dropped anybody, because people I've talked to who I didn't just say I know are going to feel bad. So I apologize to my other contacts out there, but we talked to everybody. And again, a lot of it had to do with the fact that we had solutions at Dell that had AMD chips in it and NVIDIA chips in it and Intel chips in it, right? And we were there to support the customer need, whatever it was. We took the kind of same approach with quantum. We said, how do we interface with a neutral atom QPU? How do we interface trapped ion, superconducting, silicon spin? Again, I won't name all of them, but if I didn't name your modality of choice, I apologize. Yeah. How do we work with any quantum device? And that was really our remit, was to sell the idea of our Dell HPC classical gear and sell it as working with any QPU vendor that a customer might want to go with, and kind of doing proof of concept work, doing orchestration work, and actually proving out that hybrid workflow idea.
Fantastic. And that kind of brings us up to now. And like I mentioned earlier, you joined Quantum Sky a month ago, or thereabouts. Yep. What appealed to you about this role? What's your remit in this role, and how's it going?
Yeah, so I love telling this story because it reminds me of the really exciting time of kind of beginning that process. And Dell had a very opinionated perspective on quantum, and I understand it. They wanted to understand what their TAM was, where they slotted in, and kind of being this fast follower of quantum devices. And that makes 100% sense for what they were doing, right? They are selling HPC infrastructure servers that go around that. But at the end of the day, it wasn't really what I wanted to be doing. I wanted to be pushing the boundaries. I wanted to be developing new capabilities, sort of more directly with these quantum systems rather than helping advise on the classical systems to augment them, right? I wanted to really focus on the quantum tech rather than just supporting it from the sidelines. So very early on in my kind of interview process with Tyto, at the time, Quantum Sky now, right, I realized that this position was one where I could really help set the strategy. I said, what is our plan for quantum offerings, right? What do we want to do in terms of our capabilities? And they said, what do you think? What do you want to do, right? Where do you think we should move, right? And so I get to work
kind of
with
like
them
a blank
and help them.
page.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly. And I felt very lucky to be part of something that would be that I'd have a lot of autonomy over to express my expertise and express my opinions in the space and shape that roadmap.
So how are you approaching that from with a blank page?
Well, it's a lot tougher than I thought. No, I'm not in a good way. It's a good challenge to have. Yeah, it's a good challenge to have, but a challenge nonetheless. You're responsible for having opinions and getting educated. So I'll say the first thing that I've done over the last month, my main focus has been just making sure I'm miseducated as I can be. Because this is the aperture of this position is so wide as opposed to something like Dell. I knew the Dell product portfolio forwards and backwards, but now it's, where do you want to go? Before you can answer that question, you got to study the map.
Yeah.
You got to understand what everybody's doing. You got to understand not just the QPU vendors, but the quantum networking vendors, the quantum sensing vendors, the software ecosystem players. So it's been about education for myself, which again, going back to my academic roots was natural fit for me. I very much enjoyed that. But at the same time, it's been drinking from a fire hose for sure.
So it's thrown you into the quantum ecosystem in a much wider level.
Yes. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So you came across my my radar because obviously I'm a recruiter in quantum, and I'd seen roles that had come out, and I was like, okay, hold that. And then I came across yourself, and I was like, oh, director of quantum, really interesting role, because like you said, I've been dealing with quantum companies, but this is the first time I'm kind of talking to somebody that's, the way I kind of classify is in industry, not a quantum specific company. And I was like, I'd love to get you on here just to talk about that. So obviously I know you're building a quantum team, and you've got various roles out there. How are you doing that? And what are you looking at, to bring in? How are you assessing the quantum talent that you need with such a broad remit?
I mean, I think that's exactly it. And I feel bad now because, of course, you said, well, we're a quantum specific company. Now we have quantum in the name, right? So, but I think that's still true, right? We're not just specific to quantum, but I think that the brand name emphasizes the new emerging tech focus. No, it is something to consider given the broad scope of what my team is doing, how to evaluate, your workforce in that sense. And I think the answer is kind of echoes the question, which is you need a broad skill set, right? You're looking at a lot of different areas. You're evaluating them. You need diversity of opinion, right? You need to understand folks that are coming from. So again, I have a director of post-quantum cryptography, very specifically, that's on my team now, who is helping shape our PQC offering. But then we also have quantum algorithms designers, and those two folks have very different day-to-days, but they both kind of fall into the same idea of helping us understand the ecosystem of all of the different quantum technologies together. And then, we're going to be looking at a lot of different areas. So I think we just need to make sure that's reflected in the skill set of the folks that I'm working with, perspectives, education, backgrounds, specialties, interests. I think having as much broad coverage as possible is going to be really, really key. And then that way, when we have a new project that comes across my desk, right, we know how to leverage the right subset of the team in what capacities to move the ball forwards there.
Yeah, so it's kind of gives me the analogy, you're getting your generals in place.
Yeah, very much so. No, exactly.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that the practice is Quantum Sky is now focusing on PQC, migration, sensing, and networking.
And quantum algorithms. I'd say quantum algorithms is maybe towards the top even.
Well,
Yeah.
I like that actually, because that's an area I kind of focus on. But the shift's happening quite quickly now.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to know, you guys are kind of going all in on this. What's the sea change that's happened to make you do this in terms of
So
timings, I suppose?
that's no, I if you rewind the clock, people have been talking about quantum computing for a while now. Shores, I think, was published about in the 90s, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we're talking 30 plus years of progress in the space. And if you look back in the aughts or even the 2010s, and you looked at these projections about quantum computing, they always had phrases like in 5 years, in 10 years, and that was the language. And of course, a lot of those didn't pan out. Some of them were fundamental advances that led us to where we are today that did pan out. But a lot of the projections you would hear would use these terms like, oh, in 5 years, we'll see this. In 10 years, we'll see this.
Mm-hmm.
And now you read papers from like 2023, 2024, it says stuff like by 2028, 2029. Now, of course, that's still 5 years or whatever. The time frame is still the same, but there's this semantic change where instead of saying, oh, it'll happen in a few years, is they say by this date, we expect to see this level of progress. And that's an accountability we haven't heard from the technical development before. They're really they're planting the flag and they're saying, this is the exact roadmap. And by and large, it's being borne out. We're seeing larger amounts of qubits, better fidelity, better error rates, less error and higher connectivity, all of these different metrics we are genuinely seeing improvement on. It's uneven. It depends from manufacturer to manufacturer, device to device, but you can really see that exponential curve beginning.
And also recent press of government mandates, etc.
Yes.
Has that been sort of motivational to
absolutely
pushing this forward?
No, absolutely. I mean, obviously, the recent executive order on PQC is not surprising. It's something we fully echo, which is that migration needs to happen sooner than later. Because, of course, if there are other players in the space that do achieve some level of quantum advantage, not all of them will necessarily make it known, right? So it could be that Q day, the day where encryption is threatened, is not something that we see published about in the New York Times front page. It may be something that we don't know about. So obviously the safest play is just to migrate to that as soon as possible, especially now that we have the tools in place. NIST has selected post-cryptographic standards. We're starting to understand how to do that. So that is something that and it's part of why PQC is one of our focuses, because that's something that we see as being actionable now. It's something that can be moved on today.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody on another podcast, and we're talking about France and how they've basically said, from a sovereignty perspective, that PQC layers have to be implemented in everything going forwards. So, very interesting space to be. And what are your thoughts on that in terms of sovereignty and how different countries are moving forwards?
I won't say directly on individual players, but what I will say is that you're starting to see an emphasis by governments on having domestic capability. So one conversation I remember very acutely with a European QPU vendor was that part of their pitch was sort of that, they didn't necessarily think they would have the earliest fault-tolerant quantum device, but they would have one within the region of the EU, and that was going to be a differentiator for them. That alone, that geographic tie of them is going to be a moat into of itself. And I think that's considerable. I think that's not nothing, and that you will see it will be sensitive enough. The same way we're seeing with frontier AI models, right? The geographic concentration of AI models is starting to be very, very hot button issues. And I think you'll see the same thing with QPU deployments as well. So we're just looking to understand that as it goes forward. And then even in a more like non-geopolitical sense, even if you just look at procurement, a lot of QPU procurement is happening at the national lab or public university level. And of course, they have mandates if they're publicly funded or they have grant money to spend. They have mandates to do so in a way that is preferring where possible, domestic vendors. So just from an economic perspective, I think that's a very important consideration.
Fantastic. So obviously you're quite new into the role, but I'm going to ask you to project a little bit. What does success look like? What will it look like for the quantum practice at Quantum Sky over the next few years? I suppose in terms of missions and people you're bringing into the field.
Yeah, I think having some fit from our talent and what it is that we're testing and deploying and developing internally, having some fit to actually attaching that to live contract work is the gold standard, and that's something we will get to, whether it's fitting to existing opportunities coming in the quantum space or whether it's a make market motion. I think that's the gold standard. But in the meantime, while we work on having those actual productized solutions that are widespread with understood TAM and all of those, good words. I think right now, what I want to be focusing on is building out kind of that partner ecosystem, is understanding, again, the different QPU vendors is going to be important, but just also the different software systems, and saying, what is a mature quantum stack or hybrid quantum classical stack look like, from that hardware qubit layer up through the abstraction circuit layer and everything in between. And then can we develop it in such a way that our customers or any customers, any users of quantum compute can do so with minimal friction? Can they do that without becoming, PhDs in quantum mechanics, right? I'm hoping so, right? That we can abstract enough of that away and making it understandable. Developing tools, developing materials, and doing that development work, offloading it to us as SMEs, so that it is easier to adopt when the time comes. Because even with AI, you can talk to modern LLMs in natural language, but even there, right, there's model context protocol. There's a lot of different hurdles to get through to get those solutions to production. And I think we'll see something similar, if not more serious, with quantum, where there's going to be a this barrier to entry. So our goal is to keep that barrier of entry as low as we can.
Interestingly, you talked about sort of PhDs, etc., and obviously this is a kind of a talent podcast. You didn't have a quantum background. What would you say to people who are looking to get into quantum, or in terms of trajectory and what they can do?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'll go back to what I said about hiring my team. I want a diversity of skill sets. I would rather not hire 8 people all with a PhD in quantum physics from MIT. One, maybe 2, that'd be great, right?
Yeah.
But I need software engineers.
Yeah.
I need product specialists, right? People that can turn MVPs into viable, marketable products. I need there's just so many different ways in which somebody interested in quantum computing, quantum technologies can contribute. So at one position we're hiring for right now is on our website. It's called Quantum Trainer. And we're not looking, I don't even need somebody with any experience in the resume in quantum technology at all. I need somebody who is enthusiastic about promoting the understanding of a new technology through online curriculum, in-person workshops, email newsletters, whatever it is. I need to help get the information from my team disseminated out to the rest of the organization, then of course from there to customers and beyond. So any kind of background will make sense for that if it's somebody who has the enthusiasm and has the ability to communicate these complex topics to people so that they understand them. So it really is anything. I'd say the first thing to do is just, if you're interested in the space, learn about it, understand it, and then understand what it is your background and your skill set brings to the industry, because we need everyone. We want everyone.
Yeah, well, this is it, isn't it? So interestingly, on that point, so are your customers internal first and then external?
We're going to be, so part of the rebrand is, of course, everybody. I'm getting a lot of Teams messages throughout the day saying, can I learn more about what we're doing? Now that we're Quantum Sky, I want to know about quantum, which is a very natural reaction, right? So of course I won't say no to anybody. I want to have something to give them. And so one of my first things to do is to develop an internal repository of materials, some of which are public, some of which are internal only. I'll give a shout out to the Quantum Economic Development Consortium, which publishes reports on the state of the industry, new developments. So because we belong to that, that's something that our internal practitioners, our internal technical community has access to. But collating that, helping interpret that, and just understanding the state of play in the space, digesting it, and promoting that to the rest of the organization. So I wouldn't say it's a a product for us to consume internally first per se, but the product can only come from the technical understanding. The technical understanding is something that we're digesting and hoping to promote internally, externally, and beyond.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people are using the phrase quantum translators. So people, and it's true. And you've kind of just mentioned that people, with the trainer perspective, somebody can come in and digest quite heavy topical, technical information and pass that on into, board level where they don't need to know the ins and outs. So they don't need to know qubits, error correction. So this is what it does. This is what it'll do for you. Do you want it?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, exactly.
Yeah. So you've been in the quantum ecosystem for a little while. I know you've done you've talked with NVIDIA and so on and so forth. Right. What would you, I suppose, what's the main thing about quantum that people get wrong that kind of you'd like to set straight?
I think, and this is the people are getting better about this. People that see on LinkedIn and these different press releases, they're getting better about it. But it's still something that I think is worth us emphasizing is that, quantum compute especially is not here to revolutionize every workflow. Mm-hmm. It's not going to speed up anything you're doing. It has very targeted specific use cases. Those targets and use cases will grow. They will get larger and encompass more topics. But there are certain things you're never going to use a quantum computer for, right? Can the quantum computer run Doom? I don't know. Maybe would you run Doom on it? No, there's no reason to do that. It'll be expensive and slow. So I think what I would ask, if there's one misconception I would clear up, it's that I wish that folks that have a particular domain would understand what it is that quantum compute is specifically good for, and then how that intersects with their domain. So one project I did at Dell, and this was something where we were kind of customer zero, was that I came in and I developed a custom quantum algorithm for our supply chain team. And I basically interned with the supply chain team for like 6 months. I embedded, I went on site, I understood. I was like, why do we do this? Oh, it's this legal requirement. Why do we do this? So it's diversity of supply chain. So interruptions don't threaten us as much. Why do we do that? And it really is, there's a lot to happen. Obviously, in a supply chain the size of Dell, obviously that's going to be large and intense. And what I realized kind of by the end of it is that when we get to scale and we get to fault-tolerant quantum devices, we can't rely on quantum engineers to write every quantum algorithm under the sun. We need subject matter experts in supply chain or finance or healthcare or chemical engineering, this, that. We need them to be empowered to do some of that development work themselves and understand, have the right tools to apply it to their own space. Because we're just not going to have the hours in the day or engineers in the field to write those quantum algorithms for everybody else. So, it might take a little while for supply chain specialists to develop quantum expertise, but I promise you it will take just as long for quantum engineers to develop true, meaningful supply chain expertise as well.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that, because I did a upskill workforce piece for an insurance company who were looking at quantum. It was one of the first companies that I've spoken to. We were looking at, okay, well, who do you need to bring external? Who do you need internal that you can upskill? How are you going to upskill them? What resources do we have? What training programs do they have, etc.? So not everybody needs to be proficient with quantum, but they need somebody to be able to translate the quantum problem and how to address it. And I think that's what you're saying, yeah?
Yes. Oh, yeah. 100%. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's going to come through more and more. So your role coming to this place has not been quite linear, I suppose, has it?
No, not really. Not as much as I assumed it would be when I would, roll it back to when I was, 20, 21, 22 and started grad school. I kind of envisioned something that was a lot more straight ahead. Yeah.
And now you're in the world of quantum. So what final piece of advice would you give to somebody that's looking to progress into this field? Say someone who's just coming out of college.
Yeah. Again, it is to maybe not shy away from developing your own expertise in whatever domain that is. You don't have to be a quantum algorithm developer for Quantum Sky to do quantum work, right? You can understand your own industry, and you can understand your own workflows and what it is your customers need, if you have customers, or your organization needs, whatever. And then you can bring the quantum technology to there, right?
Yeah.
How could a QPU accelerate this? How could a quantum networking device affect what I'm doing? Even quantum inspired techniques, which don't even require QPU time at all. I've seen situations where those can make a difference. So I would say that it's not necessarily that you have to get into a quantum role or bust to have that be part of your future. And in fact, I think that the greatest leverage we're going to have as a technology is going to be those evangelists for quantum technologies that apply it in their own space. And then that being said, if you do that and you do want to work for a Quantum Sky, or you want to work for a QPU vendor or a quantum forward company, then you have that relevant experience, right? You said, yes, I've developed this particular quantum algorithm and I've put it to place in the field. And I evaluated the different QPU backends that I could run this on. And I understood that this profile of QPU was going to be best placed for my workload because of X, Y, and Z reason. If somebody said that to me in an interview, I would probably ask them when they could start, right? That would be very relevant expertise. So that would be my piece of advice.
Fantastic. And that brings me to the last question, as it was. Obviously, you are hiring. You've got a mandate to hire. How do people get in touch with you or the team to kind of introduce themselves?
Yeah, please find me on LinkedIn. Drop me a message on LinkedIn. That's maybe the easiest way. My email is burns.healy@gotyto.com. But of course, by the time this comes out, that probably has changed to something to do with Quantum Sky. So maybe LinkedIn is easier then, because that won't change.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Burns, look, I know you're super busy right now, and I know you're going to take a couple of weeks off as we were talking about, to see the eclipse.
Yes, very excited.
Which is very, very, very exciting. Look, thank you so much for your time. I've learned a lot here, and I wish you all the best, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up again soon and see how you've been progressing in the role.
Definitely. No, thank you for the conversation. I've had a blast, and I look forward to talking again sometime.
Speak soon. Thanks, Burns. That's it for this episode of Beyond the Bit Quantum Pathways. If you found it useful, follow and subscribe wherever you listen, and share it with someone working in quantum or emerging tech. And if your organization is hiring in quantum, you can find us at QAI Talent. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. In this episode, I sit down with Burns Healy, Director of the Quantum Practice at Quantum Sky, the company you may have known up until recently as Tyto Athene. In fact, we broke the Rebrand news right here on the podcast. Burns has one of the most interesting paths in quantum I've come across so far. A PhD in pure mechanics, a diehard academic who thought that university was the only place to do real research, then a move to Dell during 2020 that led him deep into quantum computing and infrastructure. We talk about how he got here, what his role actually involves, and why he believes the future of quantum belongs to subject matter experts and not just quantum engineers. Welcome back. In this episode, I sit down with Burns Healy, who's the Director of Quantum Practice at Quantum Sky, the company you may have known up until very recently as Tyto Athene. In fact, we broke the Rebrand news right here on the podcast. Burns has one of the most interesting paths in quantum I've come across so far. A PhD in pure mathematics, a diehard academic who thought that university is the only place to do real research, then a move to Dell during 2020 that led him deep into quantum computing and infrastructure. We talk about how he got here, what his new role actually involves, and why he believes the future of quantum belongs to subject matter experts and not just quantum engineers. So let's get into it.